morning, everyone. Welcome to The Water's Edge. Whether you're joining us online through Facebook or YouTube, or if you're right here in person, we're so delighted to have you. If you're joining us virtually, remember to hit that like button, share our content, or drop a comment just to let us know you're here. And for those of you in the room, we have some real important updates just for you. If you have little ones, our nursery and kids church are set up just across in the lobby, providing a safe and engaging environment for all of them. The heart of our community is our volunteers, and we're always looking for more passionate individuals to join us. To get involved, simply scan the barcode on the screen or text the word volunteer to 844-793-7384. And let's not forget, we're a welcoming space for everyone, especially those facing challenges. So if you know anyone in need, extend an invitation to join us in person or let them know about our online content. Now get ready for an uplifting experience this morning as we come together in worship and receive a powerful message from Pastor Tony.
What's up, everyone? Good morning, and once again, welcome to our Water's Edge Sunday morning online worship experience. Thank you so very much for tuning in, worshiping with us today online. For those of you that continue to like and share our online worship experiences with your circle of influence, we say this all the time, thank you. Continue to do that. We have people tuning in from all over the place and getting help with their life and with their walk with God and with their faith. Also, for those of you that continue to worship with us through giving and generosity, maybe by meeting our new $10 challenge, thank you so very much for doing that. When you do that, you allow us to help more people and love more people and feed more people. It allows you to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself as you give more of yourself away. In fact, I was doing a funeral this past week, and someone that I didn't even really know was watching our online services approached me, and she told me that she couldn't really get out, but she would watch our online services and she would love to donate to the $10 challenge because it would help us feed people. For those of you that do that, thank you so very much. Continue to do that. You and us partnering together are making a big difference in our city. Today we continue with our current series entitled Sunsets. And sometimes in our life we go through these transitional changes like a sunset. This season of my life is ending. Another season of my life is beginning. And most of the time this is the question that we ask. How do I survive these changes that I'm going through? How do I survive these sunset moments in my life when this part of my life is ending and another part of my life is beginning? But a better question to ask is not how can I survive this? A better question to ask is how can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I embrace this to the point where it makes my spirit stronger and my faith stronger and it draws me closer to Jesus? I told one of our volunteers last week as the music was coming to an end, I whispered to him and I said, I still can't believe that God lets us do this every single week. In fact, this coming up, September the 15th, is going to be our 17-year anniversary. In fact, we'll have a big anniversary service on that Sunday, September the 15th, but it's been 17 years. But I still get excited to be here with you every single week. The love excites me, the worship excites me, the passion excites me, the prayer excites me, the creativity excites me, the acceptance excites me, the family atmosphere excites me, the new things that are happening with our women's prayer group and our men's meetings and our young adult group and our new senior group that's about to start. All of that excites me. What our food pantry ministry does, our homeless ministry does, it all just excites me. In fact, we got a message last week from someone that says on Monday they start counting down the days till Sunday because it's their favorite day of the week here at the Water's Edge, and I have to be honest, Christmas. It's my favorite day of the week too. For years, I was in churches that I pretty much had to drag myself to, and you were too. For years, we grew up in the type of churches that we had to drag ourselves to. So it excites me that you are actually excited to be here with me too, and we all can worship Jesus together, and we're excited about the love of God and loving other people. So welcome. I'm excited that you tuned in. God loves you. I love you. We love you. And everyone is welcomed in our gathering. And I'm also excited about this series because it tells my story and it tells your story too. Stories of letting go, stories of starting over, stories of life change, stories of falling down, stories of getting back up again, stories of second chances and third chances, stories of grace, stories of conviction, stories of freedom. In James chapter 4, verse 6, it says that God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. I've noticed something in my life that God has His way of showing me how weak I can be. God has His way of keeping me away from pride and keeping me humble. And maybe some of you feel like that today. Maybe some of you feel like you need to have some humility in your life because you're hurting and because you're struggling. Some of you are tired. Some of you are burdened today. Maybe some of you feel weak and you feel cold and you feel devastated and you feel unworthy and you feel like you need God to speak to you and move on you. When I was around 16 years old, I remember I was driving that little red and silver Ford Ranger that my dad gave me, and I was driving home from Sulphur to DeQuincy one day, and I was jamming my music. I had it turned up loud. So loud that I didn't notice the cop lights in my rearview mirror trying to pull me over for about 4 miles. So when I finally pulled over, and you know that feeling that you get when you see the cop lights in your rearview mirror, man, I swallowed my throat and my heart sunk down into my chest. Anyway, man, I pulled over and the police officer said, "Man, why were you making me chase you? Why didn't you pull over?" And I said, "Officer, how long were you following me? I didn't see you there." And he said, "Mr. Bork, I've been following you for about 4 miles. And then he looked at me, he said this. He said, "Your music was so loud, you couldn't hear my sirens, could you? You couldn't hear me saying pull over." And I said, "Yes, sir, you nailed it." That's exactly what happened. He had set a speed trap about 4 miles back, but I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't prepared to slow down. I wasn't prepared for the speed trap because I wasn't paying attention because I was distracted. I wasn't prepared for the trap that was waiting for me down the road because I wasn't prepared because I was distracted. Distracted, not paying attention, not being prepared. And I wonder how many traps you and I fall into. I wonder how many heartaches we fall into. I wonder how many guilt and regret sessions that we fall into. I wonder how much pain that we fall into simply because we're not prepared, simply because we're distracted, simply because we're not paying attention and we're not getting ready for those future storms and traps that are waiting for us down the road. The Exodus story is the story of Israel leaving slavery in Egypt. They are exiting slavery. They are exiting oppression. They are exiting bondage in Egypt. They leave the bondage behind. They leave the slavery and the oppression behind. But before we get into that, we need to understand how they even became slaves in the first place in Egypt. And if we look close enough, it's also how you and I become in bondage to certain things, trapped by certain things, slaves to shame, slaves to guilt, slaves to our past, slaves to fear, slaves to regret, slaves to bondage, and on and on. So let's start walking through the background story to set the stage. Abraham had a son named Isaac. Isaac was born in a foreign land named Canaan. And so the nation of Israel spent 430 years as a nation homeless, and over 200 years was spent as slaves in Egypt. But how did they become slaves in Egypt in the first place? Well, check this out. Jacob has a son named Joseph. Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers because they're jealous, and Joseph ends up in Egypt. And in Egypt, he rises to power under their current Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was the king of Egypt. Now, because Joseph is close to God, seeking God, someone who deeply loved God and walked with God, God let him know that there was a famine coming down the road. that down the road there was a trap waiting for everyone. There was a storm waiting for everyone. There was a famine waiting for everyone. And so God told Joseph, and the reason why God told Joseph was because Joseph had placed himself in a position to hear from God because he was seeking God. And God told Joseph, get prepared for what's waiting for everyone down the road. So Joseph lets Pharaoh know there's going to be a famine and we have to get prepared. Genesis chapter 41, verse 49, notice this today. And Joseph stored up all of this grain in great abundance, like the sand of the seas, until they couldn't measure it, for it could not even be measured. They had 7 good years to store up food over and over and over again to get ready for this famine, to get prepared for this famine, and then the famine strikes. And when the famine strikes, it strikes everyone, it strikes all the lands. Well, Jacob and his family, the Hebrew people, are not prepared because they were not seeking God like Joseph was. They were not in a position to hear from God because they were not seeking God the way that they should be. So as a result, they were not prepared for the famine. And so we pick up in Genesis chapter 42, verses 1 through 2. If you're still with me, say, I'm still with you. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his family, why do you look at one another? He said, we have to go. We heard there's grain for sale in Egypt. Let's go down. Let's buy this grain there that we can live and not die because of this famine. So years later, the very brothers that sold Joseph into slavery have to go back and ask Joseph for food in Egypt because Joseph had rose to power in Egypt and he was in control over who got food and who didn't get food. So now there's a reunion. And eventually they all make up. Joseph and his brothers, the family, they make up, they hug, they cry, they get snot all over each other. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, finds out that Joseph, whom he loves, has reunited with his family and is helping his family out. And so the Pharaoh tells Joseph, there's a famine in the land. Tell your family to come to Egypt. We'll take care of them. Man, I love you. And if I love you, I love your family. And we can give them food and take care of them. And so that's what happened. This Pharaoh treated them well because he loved Joseph so much. There was a famine. They were not prepared for the famine because they were not seeking God the way that they should. Joseph was prepared for the famine because he was seeking God, and he was seeking God because he loved God. And so Joseph dies. This Pharaoh dies, and now there's a new Pharaoh, a new king in Egypt. And under this new Pharaoh, the nation of Israel becomes slaves in Egypt. Oppression, making bricks all day long. But why were they in Egypt in the first place? Because they were not seeking God to the point to where they got themselves prepared ahead of time for the future storm, the famine that was waiting for them down the road. Years ago, to survive the famine that they were not prepared for, they had to go to Egypt. And once they got into Egypt, eventually they became slaves because they were not prepared. Now, back to that little red Ford truck, back to the loud music, back to the cop, back to the speeding ticket. You know that feeling that you get when you see those cop lights in your rearview mirror. The embarrassment. It's an awful feeling. It's scary. Have you ever just tried to keep driving and ignore that cop? That doesn't go so well. If you have, you found out, just like OJ, it does not go so well if you run from the cops. If you try to ignore the cops, they're going to catch you. And here's the deal. Today we can try. We can try to ignore all the storms that are waiting for us down the road, and you know they're waiting for you. The eventual heartache is there, tragedy, confusion, difficult decisions. They're all waiting for us right down the road. You can try to ignore them, but if you do, it's just going to make those storms worse. And once you do run into those storms, you're going to find yourself in prison. You're going to find yourself in Egypt. You're going to find yourself in bondage. It's like trying to outrun a cop. It's just going to make it worse. So we can ignore it or we can be free. The question is, how can we be free? Okay, so the next time I was driving home from Sulphur to DeQuincy, I made sure to prepare myself. I made sure to get ready. There's a speed trap waiting for me. I have to pay attention. I have to watch. I have to stay prepared. In fact, every time now I do have to drive that highway, I know where that speed trap is and I prepare myself. We must understand that we have storms out there waiting for us, eventual pain, eventual weaknesses. eventual temptations, storms, giants, mountains out there waiting for us. And God has a plan for your life, but the world does too. God has a plan for your life, but those storms do too. Jesus has a plan for your life, but those temptations do too. And if we're not prepared, then we become slaves to our negative patterns. The Hebrews were not prepared for the famine, so they became slaves. Joseph was prepared because he was seeking God. So understand a few applications today, and this is how we stay prepared. This is how we get prepared. This is how we can be free from Egypt. This is how we can be free from those negative patterns. This is how we can be free from our slavery. The first thing is this, and notice this today. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. Ask yourself, are there any negative patterns in my life? Negative patterns take us down a negative road, and that negative road will take us to a negative destination every single time where negative consequences are waiting for us. And so if we don't want to go down a negative road, and if we don't want to end up in a negative destination where negative consequences are waiting for us, then we have to change those negative patterns in our life that keep putting us on the wrong pathway. And you have to understand, negative patterns create more negative storms in our life. If we want to defeat our storms, then we have to let go of those negative patterns that keep creating new storms in our life. Let me say that again. If you want to be free from your storms, you have to let go of those negative patterns that keep creating new storms in your life. Number 2, never accept defeat. Don't make excuses. Don't give up. Don't back up. Do not quit. Do not accept defeat. Jesus did not die on the cross and rise from the dead so you could live like a slave to your negative patterns. Jesus didn't die on the cross and rise from the dead so you could live like a slave to your loneliness, so you could live like a slave to your fears, so you could live like a slave to your depression, so you could live like a slave to your negative patterns, so you could live defeated. Jesus died and rose from the dead so you could live this life abundantly. The third thing is this: constantly seek Jesus. He loves you and He always will, and seeking Jesus is the main thing that'll get your heart and your faith and your life prepared to face those eventual storms, those speed traps that are waiting for you right down the road. And so, considering all that, let's go back to our big main idea of this series. If Jesus were to walk up to us today in the flesh and give us a pop quiz about our life, ask us questions about our life and about our faith and about our journey, what would He ask? Questions like this: will you let me love you? My love is so healing. God is love. Will you let me love you? Or another question is this: if you have the opportunity to enjoy life and you constantly choose not to, why? But here's another question. Here's our next question for today. If Jesus were to give us a pop quiz today about our faith and about our life, He may ask another question like this, and notice this today. What are you doing right now to get prepared for your future storms? What are you doing right now to get your heart and your faith and your emotions and your mind and your stability ready for your future storms? We cannot live with our heads in the sand. There are storms out there, traps out there in our future waiting for us down the road. Are you preparing your faith for those future storms of loss and heartache? Are you preparing your faith for those future storms of guilt and tragedy, personal hardships, personal trials? If not, they're going to end up trapping you and placing you in bondage to isolation and negative patterns. And so the question arises, how do I get prepared for my future storms? Notice the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. Jesus says, anyone who listens to my teachings and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it's not going to collapse because it's built on solid bedrock. There's a solid foundation. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rain and the floods come and the winds beat against that house, it's going to crash with a mighty crash because it has has a weak foundation. The only way to stay prepared, the only way to get prepared for your future storms is this, and remember this today and notice this. Our faith must have a solid foundation. Right here, Jesus says that the storms will strike your life. There are storms that are waiting for you out there in your life today. Eventually, the wind is going to blow. The storms are going to rage. The rain is going to fall. And Jesus says if you want your heart to stand, it has to have a solid foundation. If you want your faith to stand, it has to have a solid foundation. If you want your life to stand, it has to have a solid foundation. If you want your mind to be stable, it has to have a solid foundation. If you want your feelings and your emotions to be stable, it has to have a solid foundation. If you want to get prepared and stay prepared for those storms and battles and giants and traps that are waiting for you right down the road, then you have to have a solid foundation. And Jesus says this is how you can have a solid foundation for your heart, soul, life, and faith as you hear the words of Jesus and you obey the words of Jesus. But what does that mean? Well, this is what it means, and notice this today. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. If you want to get prepared to defeat your future storms, then you must be devoted to finding and living the will of God in your life. And this is how you can find the will of God and live the will of God in your life. If you've ever wondered, if you've ever wanted to know, if you've ever asked, what does God want me to do in this area of my life or that area of my life? I want to know God's will for my life or this season of my life or this situation in my life. What is God's will for my life? What does God want me to do? Well, this is where you start. This is how you can know God's will, find God's will, and live God's will in a way to where it gives you a solid foundation so you can survive those future storms and those future traps that are waiting for you right down the road. And this is what it is, and notice this today. If you want to find God's will for your life, then you must be willing to do whatever God leads you to do. And also, you must do what you already know you should be doing. If God knows that you're not willing to do whatever God tells you to do, then why would He show you any more of His will? If He knows that if He tells you to step out of the boat that you probably won't, if He knows that He tells you to give that up that you probably won't, if He knows that He tells you to take that step and start something new you probably won't, if He knows that deep down you're not willing to do whatever He leads you to do, then why would He give you any more light or clarity or show you any more of His will? Are you willing to give that up as He leads you to? Are you willing to put more love into action? Are you willing to serve more as He leads you to? Are you willing to give more of yourself with your other brothers and sisters that you worship with so your gathering can make a difference in the city as He leads you to? Are you willing to step out of that boat and leave that bondage behind as He leads you to? Remember this today and notice this. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. God only reveals His will to people who are willing to step out of the boat and follow Him no matter what. If you want to know what God's will is for your life, then be willing to do what He leads you to do. And then the next thing is this: we have to do what we already know we should be doing. If you want to know more of God's will, then be willing to do whatever He leads you to do, but also start doing those things that you already know you should be doing. We should already be seeking God like Joseph. We should already be developing a prayer life like Joseph. We should already be developing a personal worship life like Joseph. Why? So we can get prepared for those future traps. We should already be serving the community with our friends and our brothers and sisters that we worship with. We should already be growing in our compassion for other people. We should already be growing the foundation of our faith by walking with Jesus. So don't give up. Don't quit. Keep seeking Jesus, because this is what prepares your heart for those future storms, the future storms of heartache and confusion that's waiting for you right down the road, the future storms of tragedy and having to start over that's waiting for you right down the road, future storms of shame or uncertainty that's waiting for you right down the road, just like a speed trap. We must get prepared now. And the way we get prepared now is that we seek Jesus to the point where we find His will. And this is how we find His will. We become willing to do everything that God leads us to do no matter what, and we start doing those things that we already know we should be doing. And that builds a solid foundation. And if we will be devoted to finding the will of God and living the will of God, then when the storms crash against our life stand because it has a solid foundation. Thank you so very much for hanging out with us today. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Now stay tuned in for an amazing time of worship with the amazing Water's Edge worship team. We love you all.
I was walking the wayside, lost on a lonely road. I was chasing the high life, trying to satisfy my soul. All the lies I believed in left me crying like the rain. Then I saw lightning from heaven, and I've never been the same. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. I felt the sting of the fire, but I saw you in the flame. Just when I thought it was over, you brought me out of the grave. Hallelujah! I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I am a child of love. Let me hear you say yeah, yeah. Oh, I am a child of love.
Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate.
Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. I'm gonna climb a mountain.
Yeah.
I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom.
Yes, I did.
I am a child of love. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I am a child of love.
Let me hear you say yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I am a child of love.
What a powerful message from Pastor Tony. And we sincerely hope that today's worship experience have left you feeling encouraged and inspired. And if you found a connection in the service and want to stay engaged throughout the week on social media, you can check us out at Waters Edge Gathering on Facebook or WatersEdge_LC on Instagram. And for a more interactive experience, consider downloading our app. It enables you to participate in online giving, enjoy worship songs, and replay messages from Pastor Tony. And whether you're curious about salvation and baptism, interested in volunteering, or have a prayer request, make your way to the Welcome Center in the lobby and simply scan the barcode, and our dedicated volunteers will be ready to assist you. And we genuinely love and appreciate each and every one of you. And we're looking forward to welcoming you back next week at the Water's Edge, where everyone finds a meaningful place to belong.